Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Thursday Night Connect-In. We are thrilled to have your company. I have some very distinguished guests with me tonight. I know that you've been asking for more, and so we're giving you more tonight. We're giving you Jonno more and Amanda more. And Al, you're not a Moore, but you're a Coombridge, but that's all right. We'll throw in Al as well. Joining me tonight, we have some great people from our tribe, and so it's great to have you guys all with us tonight. Would you like to say a bit of a shout out to everyone tonight and maybe introduce yourselves?
Yeah, hi, I'm Alastair. Been part of Moore and Core for some time. I work for a software company. We develop wealth management software. End of financial year is always busy, so the last week or two has been a bit crazy. But anyway, it's good to be here tonight.
Yeah, my name's Jonno. We've been at Moreland, or we've been involved with Moreland ever since I was little. Recently sort of started coming back to the core with my family. I work in insurance as a broker with Aon. I've been doing that for a few years, so a bit like Al, my last few weeks have been pretty busy, but pretty stoked to be on tonight and getting to share with everybody.
I'm Amanda. I'm Jonno's little sister. So same as Jonno, I've been at Moreland since I was little, and we just recently came back. I don't work. I'm a uni student at La Trobe, so I haven't had a busy week recently. I've been doing not a lot, to be honest. But yeah, good to be here tonight to have a chat with you guys. So, yeah.
That's good. Thanks, guys. It's really good to have you with us. Tonight we are delving into James chapter 4. And Al, I hope you've read it. Said that you had, which is good. But anything straight up off the bat that catches your attention, anything you thought was weird, wonderful, amazing, just downright out there? What are your thoughts on James 4?
Look, I think James, like, he doesn't mince his words at all.
Okay, that's good.
You know, he calls a spade.
Sorry, was that out?
Oh, am I breaking up a little? I find James is very straight to the point, very direct with his messages about what you should and what you shouldn't do. And I find that every chapter that we read through in James, there's always this call to action. You know, it's about faith in action and love in action. Show your faith by doing certain things or behaving a certain way that reflects your faith in God.
Yeah, good. What about you guys?
Yeah, we sort of said the same with Al when we were reading through it. It's sort of like from the first line, he's like straight into the questioning of, you know, what causes you to fight amongst yourselves. It's like he doesn't pull his punches at all. He's straight into it. It's almost sort of like when you read like a newspaper article, it's almost like an attack piece. He's trying to sort of shock you into sort of action or into, you know, so it's a bit different to some of the other books where it's a bit more passive. James is definitely there to be heard.
Yeah, it's a little confronting, isn't it? Like that very first verse is right in your face, isn't it? Well, what are you doing? What are you quarrelling about? You know, and then he sort of goes on to sort of unpack it a bit. Yeah, good. Yeah, I agree, Al. I think a lot of this stuff that James sort of rips into is very practical. It's very, you know, it's very practical Christianity, you know, in action. And I think he gets right to the heart of the matter very, very early. So, yeah. Yep. Anything else? Anything else that stood out?
I found this chapter a little different. Jumping ahead a little bit, so a lot of it's about you know, not treating people differently and treating people, you know, not pulling people down. But this one here is about almost as much about not doing something as well. So the last verse is about, you know, if you know the good you should do and you don't do it, then that's a sin. Right? So it's almost flipped over. It's rather than, you know, if you know what you should be doing and you don't do it, that's just as bad as doing the wrong thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
It's pretty tough.
Yeah. I think I've always known that as the sins of omission, not the sins of commission. So, I mean, there's the things that we do the sins that we commit, knowingly, I guess, or unknowingly. But then there's the ones that we actually, when we know we should do something and we actually don't do it, are just as bad as when we do something wrong. Yeah, you're right. Good. Team Moore, did you anything else stand out to you?
I think probably for me, one of the things I found really interesting was in about verse 4 when they were saying that anybody that's the friend of the world becomes an enemy of God. And I think just in like with everything that's going on, you start to think about, whose side should you be on, where should you stand on certain, social topics at the moment, and how do you side with something of the worldly, but then not become an enemy of God at the same time? Like, how should you pose yourself in those social situations? So I found that was really interesting. Yeah.
And I guess further to that, we get a lot of, you get questioned a lot of, you're a Christian, so, what are your views on this? Or how come if you're a Christian, you can't side on this, or you can't believe in this? So I guess it's a matter of trying to find that line between, like Amanda said, there's, the earthly matters, and then trying to, reflect that in a way that God would want us to sort of reflect and behave in it, even if, on some situations, it's not the norm within your own social circle or something.
Yeah, good points. It's stuff that we have to wrestle with as Christians, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Good. Yeah, it's good. All right. I'd probably like to just go back to the top of the chapter and just probably look at dissecting this a little bit more from the top. I think James sort of starts this out by saying that there's enemies that we need to fight. Ourselves, the world, and the devil. And he goes into the details he talks about in the very first opening couple of verses, the desires that battle within you. So to me, this talks about the enemy that rages inside of us that we need to fight. And interestingly, he says we don't receive from God because we're asking with the wrong motive, and that motive is a selfish one. And I think on the Sunday I used the illustration of God hasn't actually given me a red Ferrari yet, and rightly so, because it's been asked for with a wrong motive. And so, how would you guys sort of see those first couple of verses about battling the enemy within?
Let Team Moore go first this time.
Team Moore?
I guess it's, I don't know whether it's like inbuilt into people or the culture or how you grow up. But I think every time you do something, it's so often you start even just simple sentences with the word I, and it's just always about yourself and it's about myself and this and that. Even when you go to pray, you don't always start with asking how, it's something like asking how God is, or saying thank you for keeping other people safe. It's always thank you for what you did for me, and things like that. So I think that's sort of like, it's sometimes feels like it's naturally inbuilt, and it's quite a challenge that James says to, go away from that, because it's sort of natural and it comes naturally to people to automatically think about themselves first.
Well, we're conditioned to think about ourselves first, aren't we? We're taught in the world, in a worldly sense, not a godly sense, to look after yourself, to stand up for yourself, and to put yourself first. Whereas, that's with Christianity, that actually flips itself on its head. So yeah, I think you're right, Amanda. I think it's an interesting point to raise about how we actually pray and the things that we pray for. What is the motive for those things? What do you think, Al?
I think motive has got to do with it. The Bible tells us that God will give us the desires of our heart, but our hearts need to be in tune with God. The first commandment, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. And if that's the place you're starting from, then your desires are going to be in line with what God wants you. for you. Good, great example of that is just earlier in James. It says, if you lack wisdom, ask for it. Give without judging. So stuff that's going to be beneficial for people around you, your community, for your walk with God. It's he's not going to hold back.
Yeah. I want to draw your attention to verse 4, where it says, anyone who chooses to be a friend of the world becomes an enemy of God. And I want to sort of tease this out a little bit, because the world will want to tell us who we are and how we are to fit in, right? What it means to be normal, to fit in, right? But my thinking is along the lines of we were never made to be normal, and we were never made to fit in. Because if we were meant to be normal, that means we'd be things like we'd be overwhelmed, we'd be burdened, we'd be stressed out, we'd be broke, we'd be full of worry, adulterous, bitter, or unstable. And if that's what it means to be normal and fit in, then I want to run. I want to run away from that. What do you think?
Yeah, there's a bit in there. I think, like you touched on a whole lot of things there, and I think, like for me, I've grown up in the church. I've heard more sermons than I can count. I can't remember half of them, but yeah. I don't remember what I ate last week for dinner either. But I'm sure
just mine, Al. Just remember
just
mine.
yours. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But there's certain things that stick, right? Don't worry about anything. Cast your cares on the Lord. So if you bring to mind some of this teaching and the Bible verses and the teachings of Jesus, a lot of those things kind of go out the window a bit. They kind of fall second place. So your first place is, don't worry about anything, pray about everything. Bear one another's burdens. If you're having a tough time, share it with somebody, and there's an onus on that other person to share that burden with you. So I find, it is easy to get caught up with the world and fit a certain mold, but it's quite clear that God doesn't want that from us.
No. Yeah. Good. What do you guys reckon?
I think, like you said, Andrew, and what Amanda said as well, that the sort of normal in our society these days is to be sort of self-absorbed, and whether you want to call it greed or selfishness, it's a lot of the I and the me is like that. The normal, social, community and helping others seems to come when I have time or when I have access. That's when I can help others. Whereas I'm sort of called that, others should come first, before yourself a lot of the time. And that's just not that's just not society or the world we live in, and that's reality. It's that, stuff like, giving, even simple things of giving to charities or donations. It's when I've got a few extra bucks, So it's how you adapt that mindset of that we grow up in, of, self-preservation almost, of that you're the most important factor in your life. And, how do you, I guess, start to ease the ledger between that and looking out for others and community and stuff.
It's good. I mean, the passage that comes to mind, Alan, I'm a bit like you. I've heard a million sermons, and certain things stick and some don't. But Romans 12 really sticks with me, that where it talks about, do not be conformed by the patterns of this world, but be renewed by the patterns of God's world. And I think it's tough being a Christian, but it's tough standing out as well, being different, because we want to fit in, we want to be liked, we want to be normal, we want to, do what other people are doing and feel this sense of normalcy. Whereas, I just think God's created us to be unique, individual, and we don't need to conform to what the world says we need to be, or how we need to look, or what we need to do, but be, or strive to be, the individual, the unique individual that God's created us to be.
Yep.
And that takes guts and courage, right?
Yep, absolutely.
So then James goes on in 6 and 7, verses 6 and 7, to talk about the devil and how his favourite game is tripping us up. And resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Come near to God, and he'll come near to you. You know, I think the devil knows our weaknesses, and he knows how to trip us up, to tempt us and put those things in front of us. It's difficult to ignore him though sometimes, yeah?
Yep.
But it's like, and I said on Sunday, it's kind of like, you know, with that bully in the playground. If you ignore him, 9 times out of 10, he goes away and he goes and picks on some other poor kid. You know, and hopefully that's not one of your brothers or sisters or whatever. But yeah, I think it's true that if he can see that he's not going to get anywhere with you, that you're going to hold firm to what you believe in, and you're not going to yield to temptation, I think he will flee from you. And the other part of what James has said is draw near to God. Has that been your experience?
I guess, yeah. I think where it says, you know, resist the devil and he'll flee from you. There's so many temptations in today's world. Like even when you were saying to be yourself, I guess when you're saying that to be that unique person that God's called you to be, the devil in that is that it's scary to be different from everyone else, because it sometimes seems like the world itself is against people that are different. Yeah. Even if you're a good different, they still want to tear you down. So it sometimes is really hard to resist the devil, because the devil can seem comforting and it can seem like you're going to fit in, and it makes you want to do what he wants. And then I guess the other thing to look at is when they say come near to God, I think that's very easy to interpret literally as like spatially. I sometimes think that if you're sort of in his vicinity and you're facing towards him, that's better than being right next to him and turned away from him. Because if you're actually facing towards him, it means you're actively working towards him. And if you're facing away, that means you're literally turning away from what he wants, and you could actually be looking at, you know, going into the temptation of the devil. So I think James is definitely saying to stay away from the devil, but at the same part, he's sort of encouraging you that you don't need to already be right next to God to resist that temptation. You actually just have to be focused and actively seeking God to actually resist that.
I love what I think it was either on one of these connect-ins or somewhere. Do you guys know Marnie Turner? Marnie Turner was a beautiful person and is now with the Lord. She would say, keep in whispering distance of Jesus. And I love that.
Yeah.
I really love that, because it talks about this closeness of being close to Jesus and being able to push into him. And it's just a lovely saying, isn't it? Pretty close. What about temptation for you guys? When you feel tempted, I know for me, when I feel tempted, it's probably when I'm tired, I'm grumpy, I'm lacking sleep and whatever. What has been your experience in how you sort of deal with that? And the Bible tells us that whenever we're tempted, there's always an escape. There's always an escape door or exit stage left, even as Snagglepuss would say. What's been what can you tell us about when you're tempted? Maybe some of the things that you've done, or what can you tell us?
It's a tricky one, but I mean, I come back to the verse that you mentioned as well. You know, God won't tempt you beyond or you can't be tempted beyond what you can bear, but God will give you a way out. So it's looking for that way out, I think, and being faithful to act on that way out, not just ignore it and giving into the temptation. And that's where it gets tough. And I think that's why, you know, come near to God and he will be near to you. It gives you that strength to act against that temptation. Right. And the other important thing to remember is that temptation is not sin. You know, temptation, Jesus was tempted and he resisted the devil went away.
That's right.
So we've got a role model there. I mean, I'm not saying that we're equal to Jesus, but I'm saying that, if we keep close to God, he will help us resist those temptations.
Yeah, sure, that's a good point. I think the closer we are to Jesus, I think the more resistance, if I'm hearing you right, Al, the more resistance we have. Would you say that?
Absolutely, yeah.
How about you guys? What do you think around temptation? What's helped you in the past? What advice would you give to people that maybe when they're faced with temptations and the devil's pushing those buttons? What would you say?
I think when it comes to sort of like temptation and wanting to stand for God, it's a lot about your sort of foundation. So I've often found sometimes when faced with temptation, instead of sort of being sort of battered by it, sort of turning to why I chose this path to begin with, and going back and sort of reading, trying to delve into that relationship as to why have I come this far down the path to begin with, to be faced with these temptations. If I wasn't on the path that I was on, I wouldn't be faced with these temptations because I'd be in it. So why have I come down this path and what's got me down this path? And I think reflecting on why you've come this far or what's brought you along this far is really good in sort of reminding you, sort of keeping you on the path, I guess.
Yep, good. Amanda, what have you any thoughts on that?
I guess kind of similar to, we've grown up in church, and so it's very easy for us to say, we were taught the right foundations when we were young, and it's easy for us to sort of say, we'll just, the reason we don't fall into this because we just fall back on what we were taught and what was sort of trained into us when we were little. But I guess the things you do learn when you're young do adapt over time, and you change it to help yourself, and it changes for every person. So I guess staying away from temptation, it's obviously, as Ali said, the resistance, the more you resist, the further you'll go. But you also got to think of the reasons why you're resisting. And I don't think that just childhood lessons alone give you enough resistance. There's a lot of other factors that come in and actually help you gain more resistance as you grow. And the more you resist, the more you learn to resist. So the more you push away, the easier it is next time, and it does get easier as you grow every day.
It's good.
Yeah, it's good.
I'm just reminded too that, the book of Corinthians tells us that when we are weak, we are strong. And that strength obviously comes from the Lord when we push into him. And often I think the devil tries and alienate us and think that we're alone and isolate us, when really we have the resources of heaven at our fingertips, and that God is right there with us. And he promises, that he will be with us through that. And I think, what you guys are saying is right. Once you've resisted him once, you can build up this resistance to him, and I think you get used to his little tricks, and there's triggers and flags on the way that you see, and you get to identify those things. And then if you're listening to those triggers and stuff, then that can help you actually stay away from doing the wrong thing. What else can we say about the back end of this chapter? What do you think?
Well, verses 11 is about not slandering each other and being gentle. So I guess the flip side of that is encourage one another and build each other up. Don't tear each other down. That comes through pretty strongly. Do not slander one another. You can't get more blunt than that.
Pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Yeah, easy to say, not so easy to do. You reckon, Al?
It could be challenging sometimes. Yeah. it ties in with those earlier verses about being friends with the world. The world will often say, you can make yourself look better by tearing someone else down. The Bible's saying, don't do that.
Yeah, well, yeah, you're right. It's the whole tall poppy syndrome thing in Australia, right?
Yeah.
That when someone sort of seems to pop their head up, it's really easy to criticise them and drag them down. We're quick to compare and condemn. And sadly, I have to say, in the church as well.
Yep.
I don't know about you guys, but I know lots of people that have left the church crushed because they were criticised for, doing something a little bit different or a little bit out there. And James is just saying, don't do it. Don't do it. Leave the criticism up to God. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's really good in like the back end of chapter of verse 11, where he talks about judgment and like we've been saying, criticizing of others, and I think it ties in really nicely to what Amanda and Al have sort of talked about being that sort of unique individual. Whereas, when you, like Amanda said, sometimes when you see someone being unique, it's so easy to sort of judge them just because they seem like the outcast. It's a natural human reaction to sort of just want to jump to your own conclusion, your own judgment, even internally. And I'm sure everyone's been guilty of seeing something or someone, and you make a snap judgment in your head, and that sort of becomes your opinion of that person or that situation. It sort of gets back to that old saying of people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. If we don't want to be judged, how can we justify judging others? So
yeah,
I guess again it comes back to that sort of mentality of trying to look beyond that first 5 seconds you see or meet someone, or you hear about a situation or something.
Yes, that's how you act on the judgment you make as well. Like you were saying, Andrew, in the church, it is really easy to judge someone because they don't do something the way you think they should or the way you could have done it yourself. And it's not okay to have that mental judgment, but how you treat that person after you have that judgment as well. It's very easy for church to become a scary place for someone once they've felt judged and once they've been hurt by someone. It can be quite scary for them to come back. And so once you've made that judgment, you need to reel it in and make sure that you don't let that affect how you treat someone at a later stage or at any time when they're actually with you.
You're right. Yeah, I think in our churches we've been overly critical of young people, and I think in a tribe of all generations, and the church is one of the only places that has sort of multi-generations in our society. We're very, very, very quick to compare and condemn, rather than embracing our diversity as a strength. I know we've sort of spoken a little bit about this before, but I think our differences are actually what make us strong. Because I don't want you all to look like me. I don't want you to all think like me or talk like me or be like me. I want you to be you, because together we're stronger. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, let's not compare. Let's embrace and not criticise. But yeah, look, everyone's entitled to their own opinions and whatever. But we need to find a way of, like Jonno said, looking past that first 5 seconds where we make those clutch decisions about people. To really get to know them and understand them and realise that they're children of God just as we are.
Yeah, for sure.
So the last bit, and we're just about out of time, is the last part. I love this image at the end. I don't know what yours says, but in the NIV translation, it says, "You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes." And I love that sort of imagery. We're just a mist, and then we're gone.
Insignificant or what?
Just think of yourself as a mist.
Does that make you feel insignificant?
Absolutely. But it's true, isn't it? In the context of human history, we are just a mist, really. And so I think that in itself is a real challenge to us to make what we're doing count. Is it? Yeah. How do you feel?
Yeah, it's, I'm not quite sure how to answer that one.
You're a missed, Al. A missed. It just means, to me, it just means that our time is precious, and to use every moment that we can to witness for God and to make Him the centerpiece in everything that we're doing, and be the very best disciples that we can for Him. I think that's, to me, what it says. What about you guys, Team Moore? What do you think?
When I read that, I kind of sort of along the lines about sort of, being a mist. I wonder if it's sort of like James is trying to sort of put a bit of it all into context. You're a mist on this earth, so why waste it judging others, being selfish, sort of giving it to, why not, if our time is a mist, and it's brief, try and be the best mist you can be in the short time you're there, sort of thing. Why waste it all being negative or criticizing others or giving into the negative side of things. Try and be the best mist you can be.
Yeah, I guess what's your legacy, I guess?
Yeah, Jonno, I think you're right, because he starts with, what are you doing? You're fighting and you're quarrelling and you're carrying on like, peanuts. That's in the Jarvie translation, not in the NIV. What are you doing? And then if you couple that with you're but a mist, it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Kind of puts this chapter into context, as you were saying, that don't spend your time criticizing, quarreling, fighting, criticizing, dragging down, but use your time to edify and lift people up. And it's a good point.
Yeah,
well, our time is just about gone. Al, I'm just wondering whether you might like to have a word of prayer with us, and then we will be out.
Sure, let's pray. Lord, I just thank you for the time that we're able to spend together tonight discussing your word. And I just thank you for the different viewpoints that come together and for what stands out for each of us. Maybe a little different, but we're in tune with you. And Lord, I just pray that your word would continue to speak to us during the week, and that you would help us to find those opportunities to encourage one another, to build each other up, that we would in our motives, are they in line with your heart, Lord, and that we reflect your love to those around us. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Jonno. Thank you, Al. You guys are fantastic. Thank you for being involved tonight. For everyone watching at home, don't forget we have a special prayer meeting coming up right after this, 8:15. We are praying for the North. We're praying for all of Victoria, basically. And
Melbourne, yeah.
Yeah, for all of Melbourne, that's right. Yeah, so if you can join us, that would be amazing. If not, pray in your lounge room where you are right now. Whatever you're doing, just take a few moments to uphold our state, our leaders, our tribe, the churches in Victoria, our emergency services personnel, everyone involved with this virus. If you could do that, that would be fantastic. Join with us for prayer. Thank you, panel. You are amazing. Thank you for being involved. Have a great night. And it's goodbye from me.
Good night.